Hi, welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. I think we've got a really interesting and diverse program for you. We're going to check in with the ILCA U.S. Championships, Laser Championships, right here at Crescent Sail Yacht Club. Some of the best laser sailors in the country. Hopefully some Olympians came out of it. They crowned a national champion in 3 different categories. We'll have a little bit of conversation about the race and the folks involved in the race. I think you'll find that to be a pretty interesting conversation. The second conversation we're going to split it into 2 parts. Patrick McKeever is a neighbor of mine on the dock. And Patrick just competed in the Bayviews double-handed 99th running of the Port Huron to Mackinac race. We tend to have the winners and the guys that the big boats on the show. We're going to talk to Patrick about finishing sort of down the list a little bit, but it's the first time he's attempted to be the skipper of a boat in a double-handed and take we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to sort of have that bucket list and go through it and maybe give you some insight to some things that don't always work great. Certainly the attempt was unbelievably terrific, and Patrick had a great time. Wouldn't have changed anything. Well, hopefully he's going to give us some insight to some of you who might be sitting on the couch wondering if you can do it. It's a perfect example of how you can, and it even launched me a little bit into thinking about it for next year, even with the boat that I have. So I think the conversation with Patrick you're going to enjoy a lot. He's an unbelievably good sailor, but even good sailors in an event like this have to think about all of the things that don't necessarily happen and some of the things that come up just sort of out of the blue. It was a great conversation. I appreciate Patrick talking to us about finishing at the bottom of the double-handed, but I think he'll give you some insight that I think will be really terrific. We're just finishing up the Trans-Superior race. It looks like Bruce Akins has won that, at least at this point. It'll be interesting when they see the corrected time. We'll end up with the Bartell Trophy. We'll bring those interviews to you guys next week. And we're going to get a chance to sit down with next week with Negi Mata, our great looper who's finally come home. We're going to kind of get some insight from him. Don't forget, Women on Water, the weekend of the 18th at Bayview's coming up. The Detroit Cup's coming up. And we have a number of other events, including the 90th anniversary of Henry B. Joy at Crescent Sail Yacht Club, which comes the early part of September. So lots going on in the world of sailing. We're going to get off the mark here with the first part of the interview I did with Patrick this past Sunday, and we'll get to that right now. We wanted to talk to you about the experience and maybe learn some things that we might not otherwise know that you obviously are more knowledgeable than you were today. So first of all, the easiest question is, was it worth it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was, it's a little bit of a bucket list thing for me for the past probably like 5, 6, 7 years. I did grow up sailing, and I was lucky enough to do a number of Mackinac races, both Port Huron and Chicago Mackinac races when I was in high school and college, on a beautiful boat, a 46-foot Sparkman and Stevens designed, a custom designed boat that was built in Wisconsin at Palmer Johnson in Sturgeon Bay. So I sailed on that a lot growing up, and I also, beyond Mackinac, I took it over to Sturgeon Bay, brought it back from Sturgeon Bay. So I had a lot of experience sailing big boats, but then I went to college and started working and got married and kids, and that took over my life from the time I was late 20s up until not too long ago. And I bought a bigger boat. I've sailed, I've owned lasers, I've owned thistles, I've had smaller boats, but I bought a bigger boat, and it's not that big, it's only 30 feet, but a Pearson 30. I bought it, I think, 11 or 12 years ago. And when I bought it, it was in great shape, but it really wasn't rigged for certainly not for offshore racing, and pretty much not for racing. So I've been, over the past 11 years, really upgrading it. And last year I got an auto helm, and I did a decent length single-handed race in Lake Huron. And I took it for the first time last summer up through the St. Clair River and under the Blue Water Bridge, which is not easy. And I just wanted to do that with my boat, and this year was going to be Bayview Mackinac.
Okay, so as you're ramping up this big, huge takeoff place, when did it click that this was going to be a real thing? Was there? Do you remember the point in time when it was like, okay, it's time?
Over the winter, just kind of watching the website for the Bayview website for the the opening of the registration, which happened in February. So, and I had a crew member in mind. I did it double-handed, and I had a crew member in mind, and I had to get a commitment from him. So we met down here at Crescent, and he was totally into it, and I was too. So I registered in February, and that was sort of when it crystallized more. And then I had a bunch of things to do to get my boat, ready even further. A lot of things to do.
Pat, the name of your boat is Blue Moves.
Yes,
It's a lyric from Elton John.
it's an album from 1976. It's an Elton John album called Blue Moves, and it's not like a greatest hits record. It doesn't have Daniel on it or Your Song, but it does have Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, which is a beautiful song, and some other really beautiful ballads. And so it's been a long-time favorite, and Elton John has been a favorite for me since I was a kid. So I was 7, 8 years old, starting to sail. So there's a little bit of a connection there. And yes, I called it Blue Moves for those reasons. And then I found a place in St. Clair Shores to do the lettering for the transom. It really matches the album cover very, very closely, and I put this in my little Bayview Mackinac blurb that I keep waiting for someone to actually recognize it and say, "Whoa, yeah, Blue Moves! I love that album." But that has yet to happen. Maybe at some point, someday. But yeah, it's called Blue Moves.
Well, obviously we knew about it, so we'd ask the question.
We've spoken about it.
Yeah, so we could a little
And
bit.
you like music, so I know you like music and have a musical history, so to speak.
Well, we should point out you're an accomplished musician, folk artist. Is that the proper term?
Yeah, kind of contemporary more so.
Okay.
I like a lot of my contemporaries play more, I don't know, Eagles or Grateful Dead, that sort, which is great. Nothing against that, but I play more current music, things that John Mayer, Ed Sheeran, Coldplay. Those are my favorites, and I do some of my own as well.
Is writing a song harder than navigating a boat up the east coast of Michigan?
It's harder. It's not that hard actually. For me, it's more of a time thing. I need a block of time where I can actually work on it. Sometimes it comes pretty easy, the songwriting stuff. I'm not trying to say I've done a lot, but I've done a few songs, and I do work them into my repertoire. The navigating. So big investments for me. Last year I invested in an auto helm, which is huge. Really nice to have. I know you have one too. This summer, I invested in some other things as well, but I guess one of my bigger purchases was a decent chart plotter, which I didn't have up until this summer. And to be honest, I was just kind of learning to use it for the first part of the race. My crew member is better versed in technology than I am. And also, and has a similar. He has a B&G chart plotter as well, so he is familiar with the basics.
All right.
But that, I mean, that part. So the navigation today is, of course, it's much easier than when I was sailing Mackinac races back in my high school and college days. I remember when the Loran came out, and that was like a huge advance where you could actually get your coordinates and then look at them on a chart.
All right, so let's start with the beginning of this thing. You've made the decision sometime this winter that you're going to run the race. I would think there are two considerations. First, safety, and then the second consideration, budget.
Yeah.
So let's first talk about what it cost, just ballpark cost of what it cost to race in the Mackinac, at least this year.
Ballpark? I mean, it would, of course, it would depend on your boat, but for I guess for a newcomer, is that what you're thinking?
So
for like the first time, it's a few $1,000. I mean,
okay. That's entry fee.
The entry fees, like from my size boat, I think was like $700.
Okay, so let's use a 30-foot boat, and it goes up from 30 feet.
Yeah.
So about $700 for the registration.
Yeah.
What does that include?
That includes, I guess it includes your mooring in a way, in both Port Huron and then Mackinac Island. It includes the
party,
the swag, yeah, the party. A party. I mean, they invest a good amount into the party, so a good portion probably does pay for the party, and a few swag items, baseball cap, a flag, your class flag. As we were talking about earlier, they do. Every boat has a transponder, a YB transponder, and so they give you that for the duration of the race, and then you turn it back in, and you get a nice little. I think it's made of pewter, a little emblem that you can put on your boat or wherever you like that says you participated in the race. So, but there's so much that goes into it from a coordination standpoint. So I think it just pays for all that.
Okay, so we have that. Then there's obviously the cost of overnights and the rest of it, which I'm not. You can say a $100 hotel, you can say a $500. I get that part of it.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's got to be triple the cost of the registration. Is that
at
fair?
least, yeah, at least.
Okay.
And then there are other things that, if you're doing it for the first time, you probably don't have a proper offshore man overboard system, right?
Okay. Well, let's okay. So let's assume that registration is $700. What equipment do you have to have on that boat to be able to race? Safety equipment.
Okay, sure. And that's one of the bigger ones. A decent, proper man overboard system, and it could be old school. I had both old school and new school. The old school is a traditional life buoy attached to a strobe light with a whistle and an anchor, sea anchor, and a pole, a man overboard pole.
So would life sling count for that overman?
Well, that's an
overboard?
additional thing I think it's recommended. I'm not entirely sure that it's required.
Okay.
It might be required, so don't mark my word. But so you have to have a life sling in addition to that.
Okay.
And then most people seem to have these days a Dan buoy, which is one of these. I think it's made in Australia. And it comes in. It's not that big. It's heavy, but it's not that big. And it's a self-contained man overboard system, and you just throw it out. It inflates. It has a long conical-shaped flag-like thing, a strobe light at the top, whistle, drogue, all those things, all in one. And that, in and of itself, that was probably $400 maybe.
So is that buying or renting? Because some people rent them.
That's purchasing. I didn't have a life raft. Most sailors on the shore course do not carry, from what I understand from speaking to others. Shore course sailors don't tend to carry a life raft. I mean, that you can rent, or I don't think that many people buy those because they are very expensive.
And then obviously the normal stuff, flares and all the other stuff that you'd expect with boating. Are you inspected then before you go, or do they just take it on your word?
They take it on your word, but there is always a potential, the potential for an inspection either pre-race or after the race. And if it's after the race, they notify you on VHF and tell you they're going to come and check you out. And so,
has anybody ever been checked?
I'm sure there have been boats that have been checked, but I'm guessing, and I could be wrong in this, it could be completely random, but my guess would be boats that are more suspect, where maybe they had an incident along the way. So.
Or somebody drowned off the back of the boat. Maybe probably a good idea to check the safety.
Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing they would check for safety, just for liability.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was part of it. So now your boat's set.
Boat's set.
All right, so now we got you've paid your things, you got your money in your pocket, you and your partner leave Lake St. Clair, you go all the way up the St. Mary's River, you end up in Port Huron at the Yacht Club. Obviously you're there for boat night on Friday. Explain that a little bit. That had to be a ball.
Yeah, I left on a Thursday morning. I took the boat up by myself and left from Crescent and motored up to St. Clair. I motored up the St. Clair River and stayed in St. Clair the night before, because it's a pretty big trek for my boat anyway, with an old Atomic 4 from 1978 engine. But I stopped in St. Clair on Thursday night, and then I finished off the next 3 hours the following day. That was Friday before the race, the 14th of July, and I wanted to have the whole experience again like I had when I was in college and high school and those years, so I did stay on my boat the night before, which was a mistake. I think the smart ones kind of go home, and at least if you're close enough, you go home and get a good night's sleep.
Right.
But I decided I would sleep on my boat, and that day there had been some terrible weather that rolled through Port Huron, as you know.
It was awful.
Yeah, right as I'm pulling into the river, and there was also this incredible current in the river because of all the rain, and there was some debris. I don't even know how to entirely see it. I don't know what the complete explanation is for that, but it has some. Well, anyway, it was kind of a strange kind of a river, I guess, the Black River in Port Huron. That was kind of the scene, and then there were all these thunderstorms, tornado watches, those kinds of things. And they had told people to just sort of stay on their boats. So that was the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon scene the night before the race. And then it got sunny, and it got hot, and just people came out of the woodwork, and the place was crawling. And so my wife came up and met me, and we had dinner at a nice little restaurant and on the river, and then I went back to my boat and chatted with people, and I think I tried to go to sleep or go to bed, and I'm sleep deprived to begin with, which is not a good thing, but I am. So I went to sleep, or tried to anyway, around maybe 11 o'clock, and it was pretty loud from 11 to 2, and then someone came through the river, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, blasting an air horn and M&M, like those power boats with really powerful sound systems, just woke everyone up, and so it was tough to get to sleep after that, so I didn't get a lot of sleep.
I want to thank Patrick for talking to us a little bit. We're going to bring him back in the second part of the show. We're going to talk to all the folks with the U.S. Sailing's ILCA laser races. Bill Vogel put that on and did a great job this past weekend, U.S. Championships right here on Lake St. Clair. Brought some unbelievable sailors in. We're going to talk to him and a whole bunch of folks that were involved in that race. And we'll do that right now. Hi, welcome back. We're talking with Bill Vogel, and we are in the middle of the Laser U.S. Championships here at Crescent Sail Yacht Club.
Yes.
And I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We've had 2 good days of weather. It's a little crappy today. They're still out racing. Talk a little bit about the race.
I think for laser sailors, they're gamers. They love today more than they love yesterday. Yesterday they were floating around. We only got 1 race in. We had winds in the 5 to 8 range, and when things are lumpy on Lake St. Clair, that doesn't make for fun sailing. But they're gamers. Lasers invented frostbiting. They'll go out in November, December. So having 15, 18, 20 knots and some rain, no problem. So today's probably the most favored day for a lot of guys out there.
Okay, let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
We have a U.S. championship that is legit. This is U.S. Sailing's one of its biggest events in the country.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about getting a national event when we haven't had one in probably 20, 25 years?
Yeah, I don't know when, but it's been decades. And we started a couple of years ago. In 2020, we hosted what is called the No Coast Regatta. It's just like an East Coast championship or a West Coast championship. The No Coast is sort of for the middle of the country. We hosted that in 20. We hosted it again in 21. We proved to ourselves and to the class that we can host a good-sized regatta. And when the opportunity presented itself in November, we made the pitch, and we had built some confidence within the class that we can do it, so we got it.
So you make a pitch to the ILCA?
Correct. International Laser Class Association.
And they are a division of U.S. Sailing?
Yep.
Or are they a separate organization?
It's a one design class.
Okay.
It's a one design class, and they are a part of U.S. Sailing, just like many other one design classes.
So then you give the pitch to the folks at National, and
that's right.
Eventually,
they have an executive director, they have a board, and so it's presented to them, and obviously with some details, and in concert with the approval of Crescent and with the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, and away we went.
And there's everybody here from top level professional guys all the way down to some folks that. I
wouldn't say professional, but these are top-level laser sailors.
Okay.
A lot of kids here, and I say kids because there's a good contingency. Probably 60% of the fleet, maybe 70, are under 21. This is a good transition boat out of an Opti. This is a good transition boat, for real hardcore racers that have Olympic aspirations or high college aspirations. So sometimes I'll euphemistically say kids, but I mean they're all the top. There's a lot of top guns here.
About 180 boats?
162 was our final number.
162, okay.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to the Masters because there's a lot of people who are in this to love it. They're here because they love it. So we've got some old salts, in their 50s and 60s who are here for the fun of it. And so I want to give a shout out to them as well.
So you're saying those guys are not competitive? I'm joking.
I'm saying they're happy wherever they land.
They mentioned pros, and that was a word I probably shouldn't have used. Obviously, to be a laser sailor, which is an Olympic sport,
correct,
you've got to be an amateur. So let's start with that.
Yeah.
We've got some guys that are knocking at the door at the world level here with this race. Is that fair?
That's completely fair, especially in the ILCA 6 and ILCA 7 classes. The ILCA 4 is sort of the entry level, and the 4 is the number designates the size of the sail. So your ILCA 4 is the smallest class. It's for say 125, 130 pounds and under.
Okay.
But your 6s will start at 135 and go up to say 170 pounds, and your ILCA 7s, the full rigs, that's the Olympic class boat for the men, starts at about 170 and will go up into the low 200-pound range.
As in some classes, are there weight limits on boats?
No.
Okay, so weight's just a practical aspect.
It's a practical limitation on your physique, but it's a one design class, so every single boat is the same. It's just how much weight you bring when you step into it.
I make that joke because I'm a 420 fleet all by myself, so it's, I make the joke.
Yeah.
Where does the Midwest? Lasers are popular obviously all over the world. Two of the guys that are at the top of the list from the first 2-day results are obviously from Coral Reef, from Florida.
Yeah.
They're at the top, and there's some really good sailors. And we've also got your son, I think, is 24th. Ken CSYC, one of the former Commodores here, was also a Masters national champion.
Yeah, he made the Gold Fleet.
He's in the 28th. He was in the 28th
In the
position to
ILCA
start
sixth fleet.
to date.
Yep.
So my question is, where does laser racing in the Midwest compare to the rest of the country? And are we a pocket of unbelievably sailors, or where are the best sailors are in this country?
So there are good laser sailors throughout the country. The ones that are really committed to finding every last ounce of speed sort of co-locate. They'll sail out of, whether it's Grosse Pointe or Chicago or Lake Geneva, wherever they sail out of in the Midwest. They're also finding a home in Florida or on the Gulf Coast throughout the winter, and they're going down there and they're practicing and training. So you'll see a lot of Lauderdale Yacht Club on the standings, and you'll see double affiliations, and LYC will be one of them. And there are other clubs like that. That's the one that comes to mind. But you'll see double affiliations because they might spend time in Lake Forest or in Detroit or up in the East Coast, and then they're also affiliated with Lauderdale for their winter training.
You have two sons racing.
I do.
Does this race come off because you're a dad that gets involved, or because you love the sport? And would you still run this race if your kids weren't here?
That's a really good question. My son Billy, very very proud to say, was a part of the college single-handed national championship in November, and he and I were having a discussion on the plane home, and he said, "Dad, I think I want to make a run at the big one, and if I can get it, would you be willing?" And how do you say no to that? How do you say no to that?
Point out also that he's a secretary of one of the divisions.
Yeah, he's the secretary of the District 19, which inside of ILCA is District 19 is all of the entire state of Michigan. So he's the point person for all of Michigan, and he's the one who made the call and got the nod to do it.
Okay, a couple of questions on Inside Baseball. You've obviously been in national events. You've been around the laser community for a long time.
Right.
Now, as an organizer, what is it you're trying to do here so that when the crowd walks away, goes, wow, they did a great championship? What are the small things that we might not know about this being taken care of?
I want people to walk away knowing the story of Crescent Sail Yacht Club and Grosse Pointe Yacht Club. It isn't lost on me that the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club was built by very wealthy people to support ice boat racing. And Henry B. Joy built this club and left it to be a club for men of ordinary means. And I think that dichotomy is incredibly powerful. And the fact that we have fleets in both locations who launch and meet in the middle of the lake for a national championship is such a cool story. That's what gets me fired up about this.
Okay.
I love it.
Now, what is it operationally that you do? Obviously, there's so many small details to get this thing in place.
Right.
Volunteers, you wouldn't get any of this done without a large family of folks who are trying to help.
Right.
Was there something operationally that we might not see on the surface that you're doing that? What are laser racers looking for in a national championship? They're looking for a great facility, obviously, but what else are you doing?
And to bring this to Lake St. Clair, we couldn't do it at one facility. We had to do it at two. And big boat races launch from two locations all the time. Dinghy races and dinghy regattas don't usually do that. So as exciting as it is to have boats at two locations in the story I just told, operationally, it was very, very challenging. It's been something that's kept me up at night since March. How do I make sure that everybody is treated fairly and equally 2 miles apart? And so that when they meet in the middle of the lake, everybo's got a fair shot at the same information and the same ability to race well.
A budget for this race that's taken care of by entry fees, it's taken care of by U.S. Sailing?
We had two fantastic sponsors. I want to first say that. Markset Bot provided an amazing amount of value. We have 9 Markset bots on the course, and we have the owner and founder here on the signal boat operating those bots every single day. A tremendous value. to the regatta and most importantly to the sailors, because the quicker we get the course set, the more racing they can do. So that's number one. They are a huge presenting sponsor, and I'm very thankful to Mark Setbot. We also have the Youth Nautical Education Foundation, who stepped up as a sponsor. So those two things helped support. Of course, we have entry fees, and in the end, everything works out, and we're going to have a good race.
From a budget perspective, this is to break even, not to make a profit. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, every regatta is a labor of love.
I only mention that because I've actually had a couple conversations with people think that people put on races. I put on a lot of ski races in the wintertime.
Yeah.
People think you do it for money. You do it for the job. And it doesn't come with the territory because you've been, I'm guessing, we're talking to you on Sunday afternoon where the race is almost over.
Correct.
You almost get to take a deep breath here pretty quick.
Right.
My point is that you've spent probably 50 hours a week over the last month working your butt off to get this going.
Correct.
What's been the single hardest thing? And then the other follow-up is what's been the greatest joy?
So the single hardest has been the complexity of managing two sites. I have worn a tread on Lakeshore Drive over the last 4 days that I don't even want to think about. There are ruts in the asphalt from my car, dozens and dozens of times, and there is a real difference between the clubs and the experience that the sailors are getting in the two locations, and it's palpable. It's if you drive from one location to the other, you see the difference.
Right.
So that has been the most challenging. The biggest joy is the story that I told about the history of these two clubs. I think that Henry Joy and somewhere even Edsel Ford might be smiling to see the way that sailing has transcended the wealth story behind these two clubs. And of course, I have to say it, there's a joy in bringing this level of racing to Lake St. Clair, showing off our clubs, showing off our lake, and letting the people in this area, the young high school sailors, the young DRYA sailors who would never take a shot at this regatta, they're going to get their clocks cleaned and they're going to love it. They're having a great time. They're going to see what it's like in the big leagues, and that's really cool. That's how you take the next step. You don't jump in a boat and get a first place or a top three. You jump in a boat and you get your clock cleaned a few times and you see what it's like, and then you start climbing the ladder, and that's really cool.
You mentioned Henry Joy,
yes,
who is in his 90th year this year, obviously if you're a Crescent.
Yeah.
One thing I was interested, you're talking about the difference in sort of culture between Grosse Pointe and Crescent. It's really too bad that Grosse Pointe can't give the same wonderful opportunities here that they do at Crescent. They just can't measure up. That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah, no.
I'll cut that out. That's a bad joke.
This has been a real, this has been a burden on both clubs.
Right.
And everybody has done, both clubs have really bent over backwards to welcome everybody.
I'll cut my little stupid piece out there. So I was trying to make a joke and it wasn't funny, so we'll go
okay.
from there. Well, listen, thank you for your time, and have what's left of a great championship.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to awards. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody smiling and holding their plaques at the end. So thanks a lot for the time.
Welcome back. We're talking with Tim Moran, who is the Crescent Sail Yacht Club's Commodore. We have a U.S. National Championship here, one of the biggest races we've had here in a long time in the lake. What's it mean for the club? What's it mean for the lake? And give us, what your perception is.
So a year ago when this was proposed, and we were looking at it, we thought it would be too big for our club to handle. But Bill Vogel and the organizers have done a fantastic job. We knew it would be a full club commitment, that everything would have to be dedicated to this weekend and this race. And members stepped up to make it happen. It's happened so seamlessly that it almost doesn't seem like it was a big event. It seems like it was a number of small events happening simultaneously. And watching the sailing going on, watching the fleet out on the horizon, and then coming back in at the end of the day, people were happy, people were tired. It made for a celebration. And that's what this club is about. We're all about the small boats and the one design fleets and level racing. And so this was uplifting for Crescent. This was a great experience for the club.
Name value, I think, also helps on the street a little bit when you host these kind of events.
Oh, absolutely. But it also keeps us part of the world that our sailors sail in. And so people go out from Crescent all the time to participate in huge events. It's great to bring more people here to recognize what goes on at this club. And we're hidden from the street. You have to get onto the property to see what's happening. Well, anybody coming onto the property while these guys were rigging or de-rigging or milling around, talking, sharing tactics, they saw an absolute example of what a Corinthian sailing club should be.
The first thing I want to tell you, and I've told a few of our competitors and parents this, but in the mid-1910s, Edsel Ford and a bunch of his friends built the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club as an ice boat house. They built the tower because there was no freighter channel at the time, and they could ice boat several miles away, and the tower helped them get back, and the light helped them get back, because it gets really dark here, okay? A couple of decades later, in the 1930s, Henry B. Joy was another wealthy and famous person who lived right across the street, and he had this land, and this was his boathouse. And he saw what was going on down the street at the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, and he decided that he was going to give this land to become a private club, and he left it in his will, and he said it must be a private club for men of moderate means. I don't tell you that story to say one is better than the other. I tell you that story because it's not lost on me how very incredible it is to have the best sailors from the United States 2 miles apart at two clubs that are so diametrically different meeting in the middle of the lake to crown a U.S. championship. That's what you were a part of today, so thank you for being a part of that, and I wanted you to share in my joy with that. I would like to introduce the Commodore of Crescent Sail Yacht Club, Commodore Tim Moran.
Now, none of you are here to hear a flag officer talk, so this is a version of sailing hazing that you're experiencing for just a moment. A year or so ago, when we agreed that we would go ahead to be the host venue for this Nationals, it was a big gulp moment for the directors and the flag officers and the members. We took that gulp then, and everything since that decision has been so outstanding that this event seems to have almost run itself. But that's because of the dedication of Bill Vogel, the extensive volunteers, judges, race committee, coaches. All of you have made this place hum. This is what this club is supposed to be about. Level racing, one design, small boats. It's what we live for, and you have fulfilled that dream for us this year. Thank you very much for everything that you've done.
And this is the last applause you're going to have to give before we do the awards, I promise. You need to give it up for our race committee. You need to give it up for Mark Setbot. You need to give it up for our judging crew who earned their no money today. Please give them a huge round of applause. All right, we're going to start with the ILCA 4 class. We have the top 6. When you're called, please come up. The flag officers will present you with your Crystal Award, and please stay up here for photographs. In 6th place, please welcome Gavin Galway. Well done. The pride of Lakewood Yacht Club. In 5th place, Timothy Liu. In 4th place, from Coral Reef, Kyla Benish. In 3rd place, Beck Brill. Back here, is it? Must be present to win. Right. All right. In 2nd place, Jackson Wilcox. Well done. And now we're going to name our top female. She's already up here. Kyla Benish. Double fisted. And our ILCA 4 U.S. National Champion, Kusi Hodder. And I'm going to step away and you get to say a few words.
Well, I would like to thank my mom. And for all those people supporting me. Thank you.
In 6th place, Umi Noritaki. The last time we hosted an event here was a 2020 No Coast Championship, and Umi won the ILCA 4, and Haven't seen him since then, so I'm sorry. I'm a little surprised. You're like, okay, cool. Way to go. All right, 5th place, Connor McHugh. In 4th place, William Baker. Our top 3. In 3rd place, ILCA 6 class, Houston Yacht Club, Hamilton Barclays. In 2nd place, from St. Thomas Yacht Club, Tanner Krigsveld. Flying back to St. Thomas. Okay, and our 2023 ILCA 6 U.S. National Champion, Jake Homburger. The microphone is yours.
I just want to thank my parents, my coaches, and my teammates for all who made it happen. Thank you.
Before we do too many pictures, we have to get one more. I'm sorry, I skipped right past it. I was so excited. Our top female in the ILCA 6 class, Lauderdale Yacht Club, Audrey Foley. Please come up, Audrey. Delete all those pictures that you just took. These guys. Next, as soon as we do one special award, the folks at MarkSetBot asked me to come up with an award that they could sponsor, and I thought it'd be a good idea to have a Corinthian Spirit Award sponsored by MarkSetBot. We had one sailor in particular who was an absolute gamer out there, and I was told displayed an awesome amount of Corinthian spirit. In her last 4 races, she had 3 UFDs, and every time she was like, "That's all right, I'm coming back. We're gonna do another one." So please give a round of applause for the winner of our Corinthian Spirit Award, sponsored by MarkSetBot, Claire Considine. I was told she was staying, but I guess not. Okay. We're gonna get it to Claire. Let's go with our ILCA 6, top 6. In 6th place, Gord Welsh. In 5th place, Lake Forest Sailing, Tristan McDonald. In 4th place, Liam Bruce. In 3rd place, ILCA 7 class, from Oakville Yacht Squadron, Lee Parkhill. In 2nd place, big round of applause for Marshall McCann. We have a special award that we give in the ILCA 7 class to our top U18. So our top junior sailor in the ILCA 7 class, he's already up here, Tristan McDonald. Applause again. Yeah. And finally, our 2023 ILCA 7 class U.S. National Champion, Ford McCann. The microphone is yours.
Thank you to all the ILCA 7 sailors who came, but also to all the other junior sailors who came in the radial and the 4.7. I've been sailing the laser for almost 12 years now, which is surprising because I'm only 23. But it's such a pleasure to race against everyone. It's hard racing. It's kind of sometimes gutsy, but it all pays out in the end. So keep working on it, and I'd like to thank all the volunteers from both yacht clubs. I didn't make it over to Grosse Pointe, but I'm sure it was great over there as well. All the people who traveled, judges, and all the other coaches. And I'd like to thank my brother and my family and my coach, Ryan Mintha, couldn't be here to see this, but thank you everyone. Drive safe. See you next year.
We're talking with Ken CSYC, who has just participated in 3 days of really difficult U.S. laser championships here at Crescent. Let's start with the simplest one. You're on the back nine to some extent as a sailor, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm simply saying is you're older than most of the kids that are here.
I was thinking of myself with a top nine in a master circuit, but definitely the back nine in this open stuff.
Hard weather today, lots of wind the first day, those kinds of things. What does it do to older sailors? I'm just curious.
Well, just fatigue, and also I have a life, so I can't practice all the time. And these kids, they can recover quicker than I can too. Friday the winds never got over 12 or 13, and actually was my best day. And yesterday being super light was tough, and then today being windier, I was wishing for more wind, and I got to watch what I wish for because Mother Nature brought it on. So, and then these kids are just strong. They can hike in the tunnels all day long. They're athletic in the boat, and they're smart. They know which way to go. They know how to get the boat around the race course. So they're impressive.
I asked that question. You're also the highest finisher, at least at the moment, for the first 2 days of anybody that's sailing locally.
Yeah, I made the gold fleet of the 91 radials, but they had a sail-off for the first 2 days, and I was fortunate enough to make that, and slid down a little bit in the standings at the last day today, but still, I'm up there. So.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a local regional championship. This is a U.S. national championship, and you're one of the best sailors, in the country, despite age. Well, those are facts, Ken. I'm not making it up.
I've had some success.
Okay, so
but the laser, at my age, competing in open events, it's tough. And I knew that going in, but I thought of it as more of a learning event for me, and it was definitely a learning event. And then also just an eye opener. So yeah, the kids are really good. I've done an open event a couple of times here and there. It's just good. The sport is strong in lasers.
The question I have for you is, why do you love the laser so much? What is it about that boat?
Easy to find crew. We don't get along all the time, but most of the time we do. And it's for me, that's the biggest part of it. Just easier to put together and go do it by myself. There's nobody else I could. Although you never want to try and blame anybody else in the boat, you can say, well, gosh, if I'd had a better this or better that or whatever. The laser, you just can't do that. It also is a very strict one design, so you can't just go buy a bomb. You could buy the best boat you want right now, and it's not going to be that much better than the boat I got, which is 2015 or something.
Is the laser easy to learn, but a little more difficult to master?
Good way to put it. Yep, I'd say so. Yeah, it's easy to. A lot of people can sail at a club level pretty well, but then to get at that next level, and especially when you start getting into breezier conditions and the more tough conditions like we've had here with the waves and stuff, that's where the good people really excel.
Okay, appreciate your time. We are talking to Kevin Moran, who is the Mark Setbot inventor, owner,
founder, owner,
all that kind of stuff. They are gaining worldwide popularity, but you obviously are here for the U.S. Sailing Championships for lasers.
Yeah, at our home club.
At Crescent. Talk a little bit about these kind of events.
Yeah, so this is a great opportunity. We've done a lot of ILCA events and a lot of big events, but to do a big event at home made it special. So we had 150 boats in 4 different groups and did, I'm just ballparking, like 40 mark changes or something like that.
Yeah.
So it would have been really challenging without the bus.
I've had a chance to the 3 out of the last 4 weeks. We were in Los Angeles for SailGP, in Chicago, same thing. They're using your stuff, and unbelievable what they're trying to do. Are you now in business from a business standpoint where renting becomes larger than owning to some extent because of the marketplace?
It's pretty evenly split.
Okay.
So we have a lot of people who buy. We also lease them, and then we have people who rent them, and it's about 33% of both of those. And so people tend to rent it first and then either lease it long term or buy it, depending.
120 to 130 degree movement today on the wind because you got 16 to 17 knot winds, and you guys stay right there with these things. They never move.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is because they're so easy to move, you're not doing a whole lot of 40 and 80 degree shifts. well, we did a 15 and another 15 and another 15, and all of those just take a couple minutes. And so it ends up working out really well because you can move them so easily all the time.
Why didn't you think of this before the last 5 years?
Oh man, I should have done it. That was a great idea.
No, but it's such a. I mean, you think about it. You obviously are patented and they're in place, and as the years get better, I'm sure the motors get better as years go on. You know, from that standpoint, it's such a simple idea, but one that makes. Can you think about fishermen can stay in place with their little electric engines? I mean, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was really a merging of tech. Right before we had a lot of internet-connected cellular devices, it would have been much harder to do it.
Right.
You would have had to make something proprietary in that front. And so by having them internet connected, we were streaming wind information from the weather mark, and we're making course decisions based on all the stuff that's sent to us from the sensors. That would have been much harder if you had to build that out from scratch. And so, you know, some of it's just the world that we're in now makes internet devices pretty doable.
I'm filming you on a little camera that's the size of a cigarette lighter in 4K that was 5 years ago $5,000, now costs $600.
Yeah.
Because we have drones and we have the rest of it, so I get the technology. What's the next step for this?
Yeah, so you mentioned the SailGP bots, so those are 5 meters with a substantially bigger motor, and so we're rolling those out. We're now part of the America's Cup, and so we're heading to Barcelona in 2 weeks probably. This bot, and then we're working on a faster version of this bot for more extreme places like the Solent and San Francisco, where you really need 6-7 knots for the bots to go because you're fighting with 3 to 4 knots of current. So we're pretty happy with the size of it, and we're just constantly evolving and adding more features to it.
Last question. When you have a patent on something, when you make technological changes, do you have to change the patent as well?
You can add to it, and so most of the stuff we've done fell under that umbrella, so there have been two changes where we had a slight rewrite to add into it, but for the most part, what we originally envisioned in our 5-7 year plan ended up just coming to fruition, so those things were in the patent. So for example, the wind sensor, when we rolled out and got the patent, we had put one on, but we didn't actually have that working. But in the patent, that we were just saying we had that capability and we built out the framework for it. Well, as it got better and as we got then a different sensor, we didn't have to change the patent because it was already covered in what we originally imagined.
When you have a patent, it's obviously got to be approved and you got to go through all kinds of stuff, which is why it costs you so much money for lawyers. The additions, I'm assuming they have to go through the same process, or they're
much faster.
Okay.
So because the original claim, just ballparking, our patent has 25 or 30 claims in it.
Right.
Each one of those has to get approved. So when you add one claim, it's like a 30th of the process.
Okay.
Yeah. So much faster. So when we've added stuff, maybe it's been a year instead of 3 years from the initial patent to just the changes on it. So it's still slow, but not as slow.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Big pat on the back for Bill Vogel and all of the volunteers who worked so hard to put a U.S. championship on, both at Crescent Sail Yacht Club and Grosse Pointe Yacht Club here on Lake St. Clair. And I think from the conversations we had, I think it came off seamlessly. And for a big race like that, it's the first time we've had a major U.S. championship in a while. And I think they did a great job. So we're going to go back to the second part of the conversation with Patrick. Patrick's going to tell us a little about what it's like race day, being two on a boat, and whether or not you get any sleep. And if you're going to sleep on a boat on Friday night in Port Huron, you might want to listen to Patrick, because I think you might want to consider either driving home or getting yourself a hotel room. But we'll be back in just a second with Patrick.
So sleep deprived, you finally got dinner with your wife. You're in the middle of party night.
Boat night, yep.
So I guess the object then, if you're going to do this again, you might consider getting a motel room, or if you live close enough and not stay on the boat.
Or just come home. Yeah, or just come home, because it is important, especially double handing, to have a good night's sleep the night before the race. Because I think that's one of the big challenges, of course. Double handing is just trying to get some sleep and not. I mean, I was pretty tired coming into the Straits of Mackinac. My crew, Andrew, was also pretty tired.
Now, you're not in your 20s anymore.
No.
You've obviously got a bucket list, so there's got to be some energy and certainly some what's the word I'm looking for? Hope and dreams and anxiety to some extent that you're going to race that morning. So you get up after not having the greatest night's sleep.
Yeah.
What's your first thoughts getting up Saturday morning, knowing that this is now here?
I guess I was thinking about the food, because Andrew was and he was bringing the food. He was in charge of my crew, and he did an incredible job putting together like easy to grab items and nutritious and high in protein and lots of good kinds of things to hydrate. So he did a tremendous job.
Let me ask.
Honestly, I was thinking, like, again, it's like for me, when I mentioned getting under the Blue Water Bridge earlier, or just getting up the St. Clair River and into Lake Huron. For me, that was the biggest source of anxiety. For the whole, like, under power, getting under the bridge with my boat, because I do have to push the engine to get my boat under the bridge, and it just seemed like, as I mentioned, the current in the Black River was very strong. I figured that would be true in the mouth of Lake Huron as well, going under the bridge, and it was. It was moving, and I worry. I'm not unlike many sailors. I'm not an engineer type, so I'm not an engine kind of person, and I've got an older engine, so it's been great, knock on wood, but and I have it really well maintained, and I know some things that I didn't know years ago, but I just wanted to get under the bridge. I'm more comfortable sailing, like just heavy wind, I'm good with that, I'm good with heavy seas. I have no real concerns there. I've been in really bad weather over the years. For me, it's more like under power, that's when I get a little anxious.
Your best speed, or your top speed under the bridge, was how fast were you going?
I felt like we were crawling like a little
Fair to say you were under 2?
Baby. I think so, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
people were strolling on the Canadian side as I was trying to, as I was pushing the engine and trying to make sure it didn't overheat.
How far out of the lake, or how far into the lake do you have to get before it finally takes off?
That's a good question. A fair bit, which is why I think they set the start 5 miles out. You know what I mean?
Right.
You feel it. It's not like it just all of a sudden goes away after you get under the bridge. It keeps coming at you for a while.
Now, people should know when they go out of the river, everybody doesn't just go at once. They go in like a boat parade. They all go in different times because you're starting at different times.
Starting at different times, and then there's the cadence of the bridge openings on the Black River too. So they're opening them every let's say hour, half hour. I don't think they open them at sailors' beck and call. So there's a little bit of a cadence with the bridge openings too. And the double-handed is the first start. So we were supposed to start at 11:30. I think we started at 11:40. So there's like a little bit of a 10-minute delay. But yeah, there are a lot of boats crawling up the Canadian shoreline.
And for those who don't know, slow boats first, fast boats last, because obviously slow boats are going to be slower, and that kind of precedes it so that you don't stay out of the way. So,
although double-handed is more of a mix, because you've got a mix of, you've got some fast boats and double-handed too, and then my rating, my ORC rating, everyone gave me time, pretty much in the entire.
I would think.
I'm one of the smaller boats, 30 feet. There are a handful of 30 foot. I think John Walton has he races his Express 27 in double-handed. So, but I don't think there are any others in the high 20s. I think there are a bunch at 30 and then 32, 34, 33, whatever, 35. But yeah, I mean, because my boat is older, and for a few other reasons, I have the, I guess, most favorable rating. I didn't expect to win, to be honest, or even do that well. I really just wanted to finish. That was really important to me, and to do it. I don't know. I didn't. Next year, I probably will do it again as a double-hander. I will spend a little time on things like tactics and studying the weather a little bit more carefully, that sort of thing. I had a bit of a mad scramble getting everything together. I know a lot of people do, but I think I may have had a little bit more than others in terms of last-minute things to do. So, and as I said, the chart plotter was new to me, and I hadn't really learned that. So I would probably try to be more competitive next year than I was this year.
All right, so I have to ask an obvious question. Is that a rationalization to competitiveness, or just being disorganized?
It's not really it's not being disorganized. I'm pretty organized. It's just there's so much. And I did get hit with an unexpected thing. 3 weeks before the race, I hit the bottom, going over to the of Lake St. Clair, going over to the Windsor overnight, to the start line for the Windsor overnight race. I'm pretty good about, like, in not doing that sort of thing. And I'm pretty type A when it comes to just maintaining my boat and that sort of thing. But it was just a dumb thing that I did with my crew, with Andrew. We were kind of using that as a little bit of a practice kind of a thing. So I clipped the bottom over near Peach Island, and I had to have my boat pulled out of the water for, maybe it happened a month before the race, and my boat was out of the water for 3 weeks before the race.
Oh my.
So I had to, and anyway, so I had that complication as well. So it made it more difficult. I could still do things, but instead of like just bringing things onto the boat from the dock, I had to climb up a ladder, that kind of thing. And we couldn't do some of we had some plans to do more. We did some man overboard practices out on the lake, but we had plans to do more than we did. Anyway, so that threw a little bit of a ringer into it.
Let me, before we get into the actual race, just briefly, I want to go back to the food because I think that's important. It's got to be more than a dorm peanut butter and jelly, obviously. Could we think of it as maybe modern hiking, where a lot of dry food, a lot of freeze-dried food, those kinds of things?
Yeah,
is that a fair?
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. And then
And do you overpack for food?
Yes, I think so. We had more than we needed, but we had some little meat pies, and that you could just eat cold, but they were still really good and nourishing. Little sandwiches, kind of like slider sandwiches. Granola and high protein cookies and yogurts and things like that. So yes, kind of like hiking.
No ribeyes, but I get your point.
The occasional, we'd fire up the stove and have the occasional cup of coffee or ramen.
Well, we know from sports at any level that nutrition is a vital key to being successful. And when you add stress to it, in this case, running up a lake where you don't know what the weather's going to be, you got to keep hydrated. You certainly have to keep fed, because it will have an effect. It will have a physical effect on your body. It just will.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay attention to that, I mean, you're not being real smart.
Yeah.
So obviously, guys, from a culinary standpoint, you guys were in pretty good shape.
We did very well.
11:40, you leave the start line.
Correct.
When did you sort of take a deep breath, knowing, now it's just racing, now it's just kind of fun? And I asked that question to some of the guys who were some of the chairmen of the races, where like the Mackinac race, 10 miles past the race, they could finally sit on the edge of the boat and just kind of put their feet down. When did that point come for you?
Honestly, right when we got out of the current and turned the engine off and put the sails up. I mean, I've always felt really comfortable on a sailboat sailing, as I said, and less so under power. So I felt really good at the start line, and it was a downwind start, and so we were planning on flying. I don't fly a spinnaker, I fly a Jenniker, but we were planning on flying that, and we had a decent start, and got the Jenniker up and full, and there was decent wind, and we were making, for my boat, 5-6 knots, which is good speed going north. So I felt really good, and we had a nice steady breeze. It was a really strange, I think even the old goats and the rams, old ram? I don't think it's old ram, something, old goat and, something, the ones that have done it, those who have done it 50 times. I think even they agreed that it was a strange weather kind of a race. The forecast was for unsettled weather. There was an unsettled low pressure system.
Somebody had mentioned to me that the term loser's wind was something that you'd never mentioned to a sailor, and I'd never heard the term before. So I'm saying it maybe being ignorant to the racing, but it was attributed to some of the placements because of the way the wind was, as if somehow Mother Nature had a deal that somebody went faster than somebody else. Somebody beat you, they just were faster than you. That's the way I'd always look at it. But I haven't used that term, and the guy that told it to me will listen to this interview and go, "Told you not to use that term." Is that a term you've ever heard?
No.
Okay.
I haven't.
Then this is maybe just an anomaly of this one guy.
But that doesn't. I'm sure.
But his point was that it was very strange. That was the point.
It was super strange. You rarely had more than 2 hours of steady wind. It would change. 2 or 3 hours, it would change. And there were a lot of dead spots. It felt like being in the doldrums,
Okay, running time, how long from beginning to end? You got up there Monday afternoon?
Monday, like 5. I was one of the last boat. I may have been the last boat to finish on the short course, but it was around 5:30 on Monday that we finished, there were a number of storms, a number of lightning storms. Storms would come. We were almost hoping for some storms when we were kind of getting a little bit out into the Saginaw Bay area because we were getting a lot of dead patches as well. But the storms would come and they'd produce 15, 20 knots of wind, but only for like a half an hour, and then it would just fade. So it was pretty aggravating from that standpoint. The most sustained winds were coming into Mackinac Island, where it blew that day, Monday. It blew consistently, 15 plus, 20 plus all day, and then when we got to into the Straits of Mackinac, we could see the island, and we got hit with one of the last storms of the race. There were some reports, you may have seen these, of a tornado on Mackinac. That wasn't that day, it was the following day.
Yeah.
But that just shows you, that tells you how strange the weather was. How often do you ever see a picture of a water spout at Mackinac Island? And so we got hit with just kind of like, it was a beat to the finish. It seemed to me to be like 6 foot plus seas, and the occasional 30 plus gust of wind. And so at that point, I was pretty confident in my boat, because it's a good boat. It was built in Rhode Island, and it's old, but I've maintained it really well, and the prior owner maintained it really well. But it was there was a boat that was dismasted. I don't know if you saw that or not, but and there were a few that didn't finish. So I'm not saying it was like this crazy, windy, wavy kind of a race, but it had its moments, and those were mostly on Monday. Monday was a slog to the finish for pretty much everyone, especially the Cove Island boats.
Under the bridge, got to feel pretty good. Coming under the Mackinac Bridge, got to feel pretty good.
Well, you don't go under it.
Oh,
stop short of it.
That's right. I haven't thought of that. I've never done the
it.
race, so I apologize.
Yeah.
I should have known that.
Yeah.
I should know that.
But the funny thing at the finish was the finish they give you coordinates for the finish. There's one fixed mark, which is I want to say the Round Island Lighthouse, and then a coordinate on land. It's kind of near off the Grand Hotel, and
so it's a real wide finish line.
It's very wide, but I'm just like, I made absolutely sure I was going to go to St. Ignace if necessary to make sure I finished the race, because I was not going to do 200 plus miles in this sort of state of delirium with being so tired and everything coming into the finish that I wasn't going to finish it. And so we went a little bit past the island.
Okay, so in the process of sailing, you obviously got to be tired. How much sleep does one get in that roughly 39 to 40 hours of time they were sailing?
Oh, I mean, Andrew,
you said Friday night you didn't get much sleep at all.
Very little.
So the next 36 to 40 hours, how much sleep did you get?
I don't know, maybe a few hours, honestly. Okay. I mean, less than I should have, but I tried. I'd go down below and had my lee cloth set up, and I had food on one side and a bunk on the other with lee cloths on both sides, but when I would go down and Andrew would take over and we'd kind of switch off. We had one bunk that we were sharing, so I didn't get that much sleep. I don't really know how much it was entirely. I think Andrew slept a little bit more than I did, but it's you do start to get a little slap happy after on Monday.
Okay, so here's last couple questions. When one picks a double-handed partner, does one look for a good sailor, or does one take a friend who might be a good sailor, or do you just find somebody you like?
I wanted both.
You work your mind through the criteria?
Yes. I think I probably lean a little bit more toward like someone that I get along with. But honestly, in the end, that doesn't really matter as much because you're up and down, up and down, up and down. And it is a race, and you're both kind of thinking that way. But Andrew's a good sailor. He's got his own boat. He's thinking about maybe double-handing his boat in a race at some point in time. So that was kind of a thing that we shared. We'd gone out enough and practiced enough, and so I kind of knew that he knows what he's doing, and he, especially when it comes to things like, if there is any kind of an incident, I knew he would respond well, intelligently, because that safety was by far my number one consideration. I mean, I read a lot, as you do too, read a lot about sailing, and I like to follow the Golden Globe around the world single-handed race and that kind of thing. And I know it's not like the middle of the Pacific or the Southern Ocean or anything like that, but when you're out in the middle of, or even off the shore 50, 60, 70 miles in Lake Huron, you don't know what it's going to throw at you. Do you know what I mean? And you have to be ready for that. If you have to be ready for 50 plus, you know what I mean? Knots of wind. And the seas do build very quickly. And we did a lot of there was a lot of slamming into the waves, that that crashing kind of going to Mackinac Island, and it was putting the wind, the occasional plus 30 plus knot gust was putting some stress on the rig. Although I had complete confidence.
I find it interesting to use the word when the seas are building. It's a lake, but my point is, it's interesting that with a sport like sailing, where the lexicon, there are so many different language things that mean different things. It's funny how it parallels between freshwater and saltwater, but it changes over. I don't know. That may just be in my brain. When you finally come in, and you don't go under the bridge, obviously. When you finally come in and you're one of the last guys in, are there guys on the dock waiting to help you dock with sort of that he's finally here look, or is it more encouragement, or was there anybody talk to you about being one of the last guys in, or is that something that doesn't matter?
Well, the short answer is no, they're not. They're out. They're at the Pink Pony or somewhere else on the island, or there was no great welcome committee.
Okay.
But it's kind of funny because we finished around, as I said, 5:30, and our significant others, our women. It probably doesn't sound that good, but I'm going to say it anyway. My
Your
wife,
better halves.
My wife, yeah, and Andrews. They came up together, and they were coming over on the ferry from St. Ignace as we were finishing. And I felt kind of stupid because I had a reef in my main because it was piping, I guess, a few hours earlier, but the wind had faded a little bit, so it didn't really necessarily look like reefing weather when we finished. Although, rewind a couple hours and
Water spouts,
yeah, that kind of weather. It was just a very, very strange race, and so I'm happy I finished, and
Is it everything you thought it was going to
be? Yes, probably. I had enough familiarity where it's a wonderful tradition. I mean, that's an incredible. Next year will be, as I'm sure you know, the 100th Bayview Mackinac race, and it is incredible. Some of these sailors, men and women, who do 25 years or 50 years, and the club, the consistency there, that they've done it through wars and COVID and that sort of thing. I mean, it really says a lot about Bayview, and it's the trek back is fun. You're running into people that you may not have seen, but and boats that have been doing this for years, and the history is incredible. I mean, Rich Marsh, a fellow Crescent member, has this beautiful old, I think his boat was built in the 20s, right? Maybe 29-ish?
48, it's a Detroit Pilot.
Okay, all right. So I'm not good with dates, but...
I think I know it's a Pilot, I think it's 48.
Just beautiful to see that
Maybe
boat. It's so
that.
well maintained, and it's just a beautiful boat, and I don't know the number of races it's done, but I want to say 75 or something, and you might know, but...
73.
73, yeah. So you see that, and you see these boats that have been built more recently. There are a handful of them out there. I'm sure you've seen them, but they look like surfboards. I mean, they're 70-foot surfboards with grinders and coffee grinder winches, and really no cabin down below, just built for speed. And you've got that too, and then you've got me and my 1978 Pearson 30, and you've got Zubanel Ganubi, another Crescent boat, which is Cal 30, I think, maybe from the late 60s, and that's raced a ton of races. So it's an incredible tradition. I'm really happy to be a part of it again, and to kind of reconnect with some people that I fell out of touch with over the years.
I don't want to ask you. I want to ask the best and worst, but I really don't want to ask the worst part of it. The most challenging of the part of the race. If you were giving advice to somebody, what was the one thing that sort of hit you in the face that you didn't really expect?
I mean, the weather. I think the changeable weather and the way you can get some pretty. I mean, it was blowing 30. I think I saw 35 on my wind speed indicator going into, just approaching Mackinac Island, and you have to be smart, and you do have that. That's when kind of the experience kicks in, and you know how to control your own boat. You have to be really familiar with your boat and what it can handle. So that's, I think, just the safety stuff. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. You have to, check your rig, well in advance. Go up to, if you don't take your mast down every year, go up the mast and really take a look at all your clevis pins and all your cotter pins and all that stuff. Because, you saw that with the recent Fastnet races. There were some boats that lost their rigs, and one was like just something like that, where the clevis pin had kind of popped out, or the cotter pin had actually popped out, or something like
Broke.
that. Yeah. So you don't want that to happen, even though you think, well, I'm not that far from shore, and I can always get the Coast Guard. But when the weather's like that, and who knows, they might have to assist a lot of boats at the same time and not be able to get to you right away.
My last question wants to be what makes you smile, but I do want to touch on one thing. Have a plan bringing your boat home, because you're all the way up there, and all of a sudden you've obviously got to come home. So is that not a part of the planning process as important?
That's a great point and topic, and the quick version for me was that was sort of one of these things. I brought it back with my wife, and my wife is not a huge sailor. And I finished the race, and I hadn't been in those kinds of conditions in a while, let's say, like the finish conditions that I mentioned to you. And so over like dinner with my wife, I was in this really tired state of mind, and I was just like, how are we going to get the boat back home? We did it. Took a little bit longer than I thought, but yes, we need a plan, and you need to have I had my harbors reserved and everything. Build in a little bit of extra time just in case the weather doesn't cooperate. But I probably would have had I would have had more people bring it back with me, just given how tired I was.
You should obviously prepare for this race. It's not for the faint-hearted. Obviously, you got to have the right boat. You got to know what you need to do. So my last question is really simple. What, in retrospect now, 3.5 weeks later, what makes you smile when you're by yourself?
There was a really good. I've looked through the website a few times, and the Baby website, the Baby Mac website, and some of the pictures, right? Because they take all these pictures, and they got a really nice picture of us at the start, and that kind of makes me smile, because it captured the boat. It's a pretty boat that I have, and it captured it at a really nice angle with the Jenniker up, and that makes me smile, just because we all like to have a nice picture of our boat out there, maybe to get enlarged and blown up and put on the wall and that kind of thing. And so I feel like I've got a really good one now. I have another one, but this will be even better.
Well, hopefully you had a great time. Obviously you did. Blue Moves will be ready for it next year in the 100th Mackinac race.
Correct.
Pat, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Greg.
Just want to thank Patrick and all of the folks, Bill Vogel and all the folks that are involved in the U.S. Championships at Crescent. I think it was a great week. This is a fun show. Lots coming up in the next couple of weeks. We'll get to all of those. Hopefully we get to Bruce Akins if Bruce wins. Although, depending upon correct time, Tim Profit on Fast Tango might also be in the running for that win. But either way, we bring in the trophy back from Keith Stauber, back home here, maybe to Detroit, possibly. And we'll see what happens with that. But we'll bring you all that information hopefully early next week. And for all the guys in the back, we appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.